to another edition of the Daily Deuce. I'm Gary Graves from just outside Louisville, Kentucky. And in Maryland, the land of pleasant living, my longtime friend, esteemed colleague, and coaching expert, John Webster. John, how you doing this glorious day?
Man, I'm gonna tell you like I tell you every week. You're way too kind with the compliments, man. I appreciate you, but man, you way too kind, man. Everything's going well. No complaints on this side of the world. Sunny day here in lovely Maryland. Getting ready for another busy week, and we just come off another great week of sports. With some good things. College basketball is going on. We're gonna talk about that today, Gary. NBA All-Star game we'll talk about today. But we're going to start off. Well, before I start off, let me back up and say, hey to the traffic cop, John Pitt. May not be able to come to the airwaves today because I know he's doing double dues on a couple other things, but just want to say hey to John Pitt. But we're going to start off today with some sad news. We're going to do a little switch. Normally, Gary's the one, as I like to call it, driving the car, navigating, being the point guard. But I'm going to do it for this opening segment because we're going to talk about the unfortunate passing of Charles Lefty Driesell, former coach of University of Maryland, Davidson, James Madison, and Georgia State. Lefty was quite a person, quite a coach in this area as well as across the country. He's well respected, had a number of great players. And Gary, I know you went to Maryland, and I'm quite sure you have some things you want to share. I want us to give our condolences to the Drysdale family. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. But Gary, what can you share with us about the left-hander, man?
Honestly, John, when I think about, I guess, being a fan as a kid, learn like being there. I remember the night that they won the NIT and Lefty had declared from the start, he was going to try to make Maryland the UCLA of the East, which was a bold declaration then. I remember the giddiness then, and I can't even really say that I was like, I was still more into the Redskins and still kind of trying to get into the Orioles and mourning the Senators and Maryland, college basketball was still kind of new, but I remember that championship and how it drew in the interest. And John, in those days, the NIT really did mean something. I mean, it was still kind of, I don't want to say it was second tier, but at that time, the NIT was, still had a whole lot of prestige because, it was an invitation tournament rather than one that, say you qualified for it, like an all-comers tournament. And of course, now the dynamics are different, but then it was really a big deal. And it was kind of a precursor to maybe, becoming an NCAA contender. And then there was the epic game with NC State and David Thompson and Tom Burleson and all that. And Maryland, lost in overtime in one of the greatest games. It's probably top five in terms of games played. And I just remember feeling that hurt for myself. And this was before I even thought about becoming a Maryland student, because at that time, by the time I graduated from high school, my thought was about going to Howard. My mom said, "Why don't you consider Maryland?" And then, one thing led to another, and I was like, "Wow, I'm actually here." And then, within a few years as a student journalist, I was covering a team. As a freshman and sophomore, I went to a lot of games, and by my junior year, I was attending games in an official capacity and sometimes as a fan. And one thing about it is, like, I can't think of any time. Oh, and one other thing, at the time I was living in the athletic dorm, and let's see, I'm trying to think. Albert King was there. Gosh, Reggie Jackson, Ernest Graham was like on the floor below me. So it's like these guys that I had watched, for a year before I got there. It's like, gosh, they're like right here. Yeah, I saw them in the dining hall and stuff. And that was when I was trying to call myself trying to become a football player, and it's like just by fate, I had just ended up in that same dorm in Ellicott, and and here they are. So there was so much there. And the thing about Lefty, with all the tough losses that he had, I think he still kept it entertaining, that you always thought the next time out against North Carolina or NC State or anybody else, even Duke. And, there was a time when Krzyzewski had first started at Duke that Lefty, kind of had the upper hand as Krzyzewski, Coach K was, trying to establish that program. Let's see what night, I'm trying to remember who his predecessor was,
Wasn't that
1978.
Bill? Wasn't that Bill Foster?
Bill Foster, that's right. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's right. That's right. I think they had two Fosters in the ACC at that time.
The other one's at Clemson.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And in fact, at that time, South Carolina was still in the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think back on all of those things, and Lefty had won an epic game against them. That year was like 31-30, and you look at the score, and it's just like, God, was anybody making baskets? The game was completely different, though. Lefty had to figure out how to beat the four corners. Everybody had to figure out how to beat the four corners. Lefty could play a slow down game as well, but then he got Albert King, and like I said, Reggie Jackson and Buck Williams, Ernest Graham, what was it, 44 points, which I think is still a record. Obviously, John, he put Maryland on the map. He was a character. I think you had mentioned that. Sometimes I think it got him in trouble. I could get into a little bit about that, but Lefty never had a problem making himself a lightning rod for criticism or scrutiny. Um, as a Maryland student, you kind of felt his pain when they came up short in some games, maybe like the 1980 ACC title when they lost to Duke, disputed foul that wasn't called, all kinds of things like that. And in 84, when they, excuse me, when they won the ACC, there was just like so much adulation, and adoration and appreciation, all the A's that you can think of, because he had gotten a team there. It felt like it was kind of a reward for all of those disappointments that he had, that year. And it was a year that nobody really expected them to do it. And of course, that year, Georgetown ultimately won the championship. So, there was that. There was hope that year. I remember covering them in the tournament, where they had gone down to Birmingham and played in the regional, and it gotten to the Sweet 16, and you kept thinking this was going to be the year that they could really go far, maybe even meet Georgetown. Of course, it didn't happen, but it was just fun to just be part of the ride. And of course, Len Bias, who might be arguably the greatest ever at Maryland, that he brought in, probably, but in losing out in Moses Malone. And remember, I don't know if you recall that. You can think what might have been had he gotten Moses Malone, had Moses Malone not gone to the ABA and the Utah Stars and such, that would have been his Jabbar, his Lou Alcindor, had he gotten him there. But that team was still pretty good. Len Elmore, John Lucas, Tom McMillan. Oh gosh, what was O'Brien? I want to say it was Jim O'Brien.
Jim O'Brien.
Yeah.
I still have visions of Jim O'Brien in the South Carolina game when Lefty was stalling, and he's just standing
Hmm.
there holding the ball. What
Yeah.
people don't realize, the final score, I think, as you said, was 31-30. The score at halftime was 3-2 or 4-3.
I, which seems, again, you mentioned that to somebody today. It's just like, what did they only play 20 minutes or something like that then? But the game was completely different. I mean, just think about like when Michael Jordan beat Georgetown. What was that, 60, 64, 62, or 63, 62, or something like that? That here he comes into the NBA and is scoring 30 points a game. And the joke back then was the only person that to keep Michael Jordan, under 30 points a game was Dean Smith. I mean, and I think the thing I appreciated about Lefty that he was part of that era where the coaches were the personalities. And I mean, of course, you can remember the Bill Waltons and the Lou Alcindors and the Oscar Robertsons and all of these great players that came out. But John, you as a UCLA fan, you remember John Wooden. Um, let's see, here in Louisville, we remember, Denny Crum as part of it, as larger than life. Um, Lefty's exit was really sad. Of course, in the aftermath of Len Bias's untimely death from a cocaine overdose. And I remember back then just feeling kind of mixed about his departure. That Lefty had a few other little incidents before that with players. Herman Veal, um, had was suspended for a campus violation, and Lefty kind of shot himself in the foot, or put his foot in his mouth, maybe a better way, in asserting that he had more power than he did, and he was brought down front by John Slaughter, the chancellor at the time. And then this happened, and it was just devastating. And again, I think the coach does bear some responsibility for his program, but it was one, unfortunately, that I said, well, he was kind of out of his control by then. Um, and he was kind of made a scapegoat in retrospect. Um,
Help me understand something, Gary. I was still in Salisbury when he first came here. I guess
mhm.
that was 71
Yeah.
when he first came. Tell us how much of a rock star he was, because if I'm not mistaken, he was here. Lombardi was here with the Washington franchise, and Ted Williams was here with the Senators.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Now, Ted Williams came in '69, as did Lombardi. Um,
Or so was it George Allen? Was George Allen with
George
Washington?
Allen came in '71. So yeah, it was
So it was
about, yeah,
George Allen.
yeah,
Yeah.
George
So it
Allen.
was.
And of course, he turned the city on its ear by turning them into a contender right away. And here's Lefty that turns them into, an instant contender as well. It was about really Lefty and John Thompson, to an extent. It was just a little bit later coming along, helped put Washington on the map, on the sports map, in a way that, and George Allen, of course, in a way that I don't think anybody around here ever expected. And it just kind of grew from there. And of course, it goes into the '80s. And I think obviously when Len Bias came there, we, every year, especially in the aftermath of Georgetown's success with Ewing and Thompson, that you thought Maryland could be right there. And then the tragedy happened, and it just came to a crashing halt, and it just seemed like it was just going to be forever before Maryland would ever get back on the map. And of course, at that time too, football wise, Bobby Ross had turned Maryland, well, Jerry Claiborne and Bobby Ross had turned Maryland into, not so much national title contenders, but had turned them into a bowl team. They were exciting to watch. They were, perennial contenders. And of course, in the '70s, for all the talk about Clemson, now I think, again, back then it was Maryland a lot that, that was expected to be, the the standard bearer. And of course, Maryland sent Randy White to the NFL, to the Dallas Cowboys. John Pitt, you can thank me for that, or thank Maryland for that. And he was a force. He really was a force. But basketball wise, Lefty put Maryland on the map, and to a point that when things came, again, to a tragic halt, that it was devastating. There was NCAA probation that followed, unfortunately, under Bob Wade. And then, of course, from the ashes comes Gary Williams, who, lifted them to the pinnacle in 2002. So I think, you can look at it as a line on a graph, like almost there, then, hitting rock bottom, and then getting to the mountaintop. And of course, as time went on, I think the opinion of Lefty kind of softened. They finally brought him back, named a court after him, or named some part of him, I think, of their home court, after him. And, you could give him credit for the Xfinity Center in terms of, again, just building basketball into a thing where it needed to expand beyond Cole Fieldhouse, which, of course, was just a great place to watch a game, John.
Well, I tell you, I have a lot of fond memories of Lefty, Gary. I appreciate you for sharing those fond memories. The
Yeah.
guy was just, I remember for as a little kid in Salisbury, he said it was going to be the UCLA of the East. And I remember watching those teams and beginning with McMillan, Elmore, Howard White, Bob Bodell. Then you
Hmm.
move into
Owen
John
Brown,
Lucas.
right? I mean, he was
Then you
another
move into
great
John
name.
Lucas and Brad Davis, Mo Howard, Tom Roy, Owen Brown. That was the
Hmm.
front line when they weren't supposed to do anything, because guess who decided not to go there? Moses Malone. Then you
Hmm.
moved into the Buck Williams, Ernie Graham, Greg Manning, Albert King time,
Hmm.
and then you had the time with Adrian Branch, another great player. You had
Hmm.
Bias was one of the absolute best. It's just a lot that he did there. He started Midnight Basketball. Hey man,
Yeah.
all I can say is the left-hander, rest in peace,
Thanks
my
for the
great
memories.
coach. And thanks
Yeah.
for the memories.
To kind of get out of this, I'm always the other thing that I'm always credit Lefty for, and I think I posted this on Facebook. Of course, there were many stories about Lefty, and there were many stories that Lefty told. So I don't think I can reveal. I mean, they were never, like off-color stories or whatever. But we're in a different time. Those are things that we could talk about off air. But he was an entertainer. I mean, he was a salesman, and he was a great recruiter, obviously. But he was a salesman for his program. He embraced it. He told stories that, again, he made a lot of friends in the media, even though he had more than his share of critics, with the Sun and the Washington Post. And again, yeah, he earned the criticism, but he also earned the praise. But nothing was boring about him. And at many of those weekly press conferences, we had Lido Pizza, and that was my introduction to Lido Pizza. John, it's a Washington institution. Am I right? I
There's
mean,
only
it's
two kinds of pizza that I will eat, Gary. You know it. It's Three Brothers and Lido's.
oh
That's the
man, I
only
forgot
pizza
about
that I
Three
want.
Brothers.
That's
Yeah.
all and Lido's is number one,
Hmm.
without a doubt.
Yeah, I
But
mean, we got Five Guys burgers out here in Kentucky, but man, if Lido's expands westward, I'll be right there when those doors open. And again, I give credit to Lefty for bringing that on, because I was like, man, where did this pizza come from? I will put Lido's pizza up against any pizza, even Chicago deep dish, and I'll just leave it at that, because it was, or it is what it is. But John, I guess we move on from Lefty and Maryland and everything, especially with the state of the program right now, to where college basketball is at this moment with UConn. currently number one, riding a 14-game winning streak. And I think, John, in a year where we've seen several number ones and teams that have looked strong, that we're at that point in February where UConn is starting, much like like it did last year, to rise above the crowd and really show that it's the top program. And Hurley has really built a program there that not only is dominating, or I'll say leading, the Big East at this point, but really looks like the team to beat. And I guess quietly, John, UConn is that program for all the attention that Duke and Kansas and Kentucky have gotten. You're looking at a program that is eyeing a sixth national championship. And that's something that I don't think people really want, it takes kind of getting your mind around it, maybe because of all the attention that Gino Ariama has gotten. It has drawn, obviously with, the successful women's program. But here's UConn. You figure they've had three different coaches win championships. Hurley, um, obviously, God, gosh, it was right on the tip of my tongue. Won it in 2014. And that's, he's
You talking
just,
about Calhoun?
yeah, Jim Calhoun, he won three titles. And Kevin's last name, who
Ollie.
what's that?
Ollie.
Kevin Ollie, thank you. Whew. Who who beat Kentucky, to win in 2014. And it's like not only has that bar, these these three coaches. I mean, Calhoun, took them there with three titles. Ollie wins what, one? Oh, let's see, one, two, yeah, he won three. Ollie won one, and Hurley, won it last year. But here they are. They're poised to pursue a sixth one. And where do you put this school in Storrs, Connecticut, on the pantheon of great programs? Granted, it's not the same as what Coach K did, over 40 some years down at Duke, but you're talking about a program that, again, five titles, possibly could win a sixth, in a position at some point, to keep being in that title conversation year after year. And remember, after Ollie won and then he left, and they kind of, they faced NCAA discipline, you wondered whether they would ever get there. And their return, of course, to the Big East has helped elevate the Big East.
Well, UConn's a really good program. I'll say, maybe not Krzyzewski and Duke 40 some years, but it's been at least 30 years that UConn's been in the thick of things. I mean, Calhoun, at the
Yeah.
first go around in the Big East, he was always up there with Coach Thompson and Jim Boeheim to see who was going to win that Big East championship.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been a tough team. The team that Hurley has this year is another good team. It's too early for me to say what I think is going to happen with them. I think they're going to be formidable. I think they'll be a contender, but I see some other
Mm-hmm.
really good teams out there. I see Houston, who I watched last night. They are just so
I missed that
ridiculous on
game.
defense. They're oh my goodness. Um, Bell is playing BYU tonight. Bell is another good one. Kansas is a good one this year. Out
Yeah.
in the Big Ten, you know, people aren't really crazy about Purdue, but as long as they got that big aircraft carrier in the middle, you have to give them respect. Zach Edey changes a game. Not only a flight of a ball, he changes a game.
Yeah.
So, and you got some teams out west that are going to compete as well. It's going to be really interesting this year, Gary. I mean, without a doubt, UConn is a very good team. They've proven it. Marquette is good, but they got blown out by UConn this weekend.
Yeah.
Your hometown team pulled out a really great win over Auburn, went down into the jungle on college
Yeah.
game day
Yep.
and just choke them out and just beat them. I
Yeah.
probably shouldn't say choke them out.
No,
Sorry, take
no,
that back.
it's an
Let me find
interesting term.
let me find another term instead of choke them out. Just beat the brakes off of them. Let's go with that. I apologize to you all. I should not have said choke. That's not correct.
I,
So,
but we understand your enthusiasm and sentiment, and I think the thing for me that was impressive about that and watching is something that people in Lexington have been waiting for all year is defense.
mhm.
That for the first time in a minute, and actually I'd say, yeah, probably for the first time since early in the season that they won a game with, with defense. And okay, people here hope it's not a one-off. In a way, it's not because, they've put together back-to-back games now with with defense and in terms of beating Ole Miss and then going down there. Of course, now they got to go down to the Maravich Center and beat LSU tomorrow night, and then they have to face Alabama on Saturday. But there are still questions. I think with Kentucky, it's about whether they can sustain it. But the thing about college basketball, and this is why I like where UConn is right now, that if you're looking, you're always looking to play your best basketball late February, early March. And UConn is starting to show that kind of consistency. I mean, obviously, it's easy to say when they won 14 straight, but again, in a sport or in a season where you're looking for that team to beat, they're looking like that team again at 24-2, even in a very competitive Big East. That here they are up top. Houston, you're right. That's a team to watch. Purdue, I haven't counted them out. And for that matter, let's look at Tennessee. Let's not forget Tennessee because Tennessee just destroyed Kentucky when they came in here. They're a very good postseason team. I think they could be there. And let's not forget Iowa State. From the Big 12. That's a team that that could give Kansas some go. So you know, to your point, it is wide open, but UConn is starting to show right now that the look of a team that's intent on defending, not only defending their title, but kind of really getting into that conversation as one of the elite programs. What you're talking about a possible sixth title that would put them above Duke in terms of total titles and just a couple behind Kentucky.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
let's look forward to March. Let's look forward to games this week before we even get into that.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. Football season is over now. I'm full steam ahead on basketball, men's division, women's division as well. Watching South Carolina, watching LSU, watching Virginia Tech, watching my Notre Dame. I'm all in, Gary.
Oh man, it's funny you mentioned Notre Dame, John. I wish you were here because they're coming into Louisville tomorrow night.
That's a tall order for them. They beat Duke last night, but it's going to be tough. Louisville's going to be really upset. They just took a rough loss to Virginia Tech, so that's going to be a rough game for my Fighting Irish.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, well, we can talk about the future of Louisville basketball another time. We'll probably do it off air, but yeah, that's the fun thing about college basketball. Now you're starting to see some separation in some leagues. You're starting to see things kind of bunched together in some other leagues, and that's what's going to make it fun when March rolls around. And just so we don't forget another institution, the CIAA tournament is coming up in another few days too. The family reunion of basketball, a mecca of of HBCUs meeting right up the road from you in Baltimore. I wrote about it last year about the importance of that tournament and why it's, why it matters so much. And John, you can take us from college basketball into the NBA by telling us why Baltimore is becoming a destination now.
Hey, Charm City. That's all it is. Charm City. You got the Ravens, you got the Orioles, you got good opportunities to do a lot of different things in the city. One of the things that people seem to enjoy now is gambling. So you have your casinos and everything in Baltimore as well. And to have the CIAA tournament here, it's on my bucket list. I have to
Mhm.
admit, I have never been to a CIAA game, tournament game. I've never been to the CIAA
You're
tournament.
kidding. Wait a minute. Didn't you play at Bowie State, my man?
No, 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 no. I was at Bowie State, but
Oh, okay. Okay.
but I, that's a dream for me to one day go to a CIAA tournament game. I've never been, and I would love to go.
Yep. Yep. That's on my bucket list as well. I mean, it's one thing to write about it, but it's like, man, how do I write about something and not get it? Well, you know something, I take that back. I did go to one game when it was down in Virginia back in the day. Kind of stumbled upon it, and so I got a chance to take in one game. I want to take in the whole week, and either in retirement or in extended work capacity,
Gary,
because
what's the possibility of the Daily Deuce covering the CIAA tournament?
well, let's see if we can make it happen at some point. It might not be this year, but hey, we can plan ahead for next year. Take it up the road. That will be fun.
We could, we could be on assignment, Gary.
That's right. That's right. Make it a work thing. I don't know if how we could expense it out, but we'll figure out a way.
Yeah, well, we
Yeah.
we would be
So
staying. We would be staying at my house, and you'd be driving.
that works for me because I'm pretty sure you'll like riding in a Mustang.
No complaints. No
All
complaints
right.
whatsoever.
All right. Now we segue up to the next level, the All-Star game, which was recently concluded in Indianapolis. John, I more than 200 points. I think what they combined for 397 points. Is that what?
What was it 211 to 196?
Yeah, the 196. So yeah, that's I mean, wow. That's all I can really say. I actually watched this game. Look, I had no pretense of defense, and of course, looking on social media, everybody's saying, "Oh, it's unwatchable," and there's no defense played. I'm gonna play devil's advocate, and I'm gonna say, does anybody really expect defense from an all-star game? I mean, you got the best scorers in there. Does anybody really, really in their heart of hearts expect defense? They probably would say, oh, they're handicapping the game. We want to see scores. Okay, well, you got scores, and people say, well, all they do is jack up threes. That's, honestly, this year, John, I said I actually wanted to watch it. After watching the three-point contest on Saturday night, just watching Dame, watching all the great shooters do what they do. Sabrina Ionescu and Steph Curry going at it. I mean, it was actually fun. And maybe because it was in Indianapolis where where there's a lot of basketball tradition, that it just added a little something to it. And 200 points by the East and in winning that, it really didn't bother me. I mean, again, I tried to enjoy it for the fun. It was just nice to see East versus West as opposed to, Team Red versus Team Yellow, all these other little exotic, things. Since you talk about betting and stuff, it seemed like a game that was created more for prop bets than anything else. But it was just fun to watch. And here's a number that jumped out. Karl Anthony Towns, 50 points in 28 minutes. And he wasn't the MVP because it goes to the winning team. 50 points in 28 minutes. That's ridiculous.
Hey, I don't know where to start. For me, um, 3-point shooting contest I enjoyed. The skill contest I enjoyed. The dunk contest I'm having a hard time with. McClung won. He's won for the last 2 years, but he can't find his way into an NBA team. And I don't know how I really feel about that, and
Mhm.
I think the dunk contest is not what it used to be because I think a lot of the players who could do it have backed out. So
Mhm.
again, I don't take anything away from Mac McClung. He won, but it's just not what he used to be. And that's a heck of a dunk to dunk over top of Shaq. But you know,
Yeah.
the game, well, Gary, this is all I'll say to you. When I did coach, and you were there for a lot of the games I coached, my teams were predicated on full court pressure and defense. So you already know for me, watching 211 points, I just and it and it's there's nothing you can do about Lillard pulling up at half court and shooting, hitting up the net. Nothing you can do about that. Nothing you can do about Steph coming one step across half court, pulling up nothing but net.
Mhm.
But to drive to the basket, nobody there, easy layups. I'm not talking about hurting somebody. I'm not talking about flattening anybody out, but too many uncontested shots. Let me say it again. Damian Lillard shooting from 50 feet at half court should be definitely uncontested because nobody in their right mind is pulling their defense that far out to contest somebody. But
Yeah.
the other things I did like the fact that the All-Star game was in Indiana, because I still see Indianapolis as an ABA town. And I
Mhm.
say that as a positive, not a negative. I still see Roger Brown. I still see Mel Daniels. I still see those guys with the red,
George
white,
McGinnis.
George McGinnis. I still see those guys with the red and white blue ball. I think Rick Mountain was on that Indiana Pacer team for a while
Yeah.
too, I think.
Yeah.
So I still see that. I think Indianapolis did a wonderful job hosting the event. Wonderful job. But if you want to continue to have the All-Star game, you have to figure out, and I don't have the answer, but you have to figure out how to make the game more consistent from a competition standpoint and a defensive standpoint. I don't have the answer. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I
Yeah.
do know it needs
Yeah.
to be there. But
Yeah.
as a whole for the weekend, Indianapolis, thumbs up.
Indeed. Well, that takes us to the end. It seemed like it's kind of abbreviated, but I think we got a whole lot in. Again, with the end of football season, we kind of lost that anchor for a little while. At some point over the next few weeks, we'll hopefully start talking about the UFL because I think that's actually kind of compelling, especially with the merger of the USFL and the XFL. And I think there is a market and a audience for spring football. We'll get into that. But in the meantime, folks, let's watch plenty of college basketball on the men's and women's side. And I'll just say this: I think because of Clark's achievement in becoming the NCAA women's all-time scoring leader, that maybe that drove a little bit of interest for me in the All-Star game, and seeing what we saw over the weekend because how does she break the record? She steps across half court, launches one from from the emblem on the floor and hits it from about 30 feet. How fitting is that, John?
Hey, again, who in their right mind is pulling their defense out that far anyway? So,
Nobody. Nobody.
so it
And
was a
until
great
teams
shot.
figure out whether to do that, that's what we're gonna have. Maybe defense has to become a full court thing again. Rick Pitino. who railed about that, and he had a good point. But again, this is why we watch the games, to see who's going to play defense in the NBA, who's going to play defense on the college game. Um, so in the meantime, let's just watch all the sports we can, because it takes us away from our daily grind. It's a release like it's supposed to be. And I guess that's all I can say. John, take us home.
Hey, another great week in sports. Gary, I enjoyed this conversation. It's been absolutely great. Everybody, watch women's basketball, watch some men's basketball, watch the NBA. Spring training has just started with baseball. Check that out as well. Watch some soccer, but just watch some sports. And above all else, come back and see us again real soon. Take care.